Nathan Carter was the one they didn't bother explaining. When the Hargrove family gathered in Richard Hargrove's study that Tuesday evening, the kind of room where decisions were made and not questioned, Nathan was already seated by the window, watching the street below. He had arrived 10 minutes early. He always did. Not because he was eager, because he believed that the people who arrived early saw things others missed. Richard Hargrove sat behind his desk the way men sit when they've practiced authority long enough that it no longer requires effort. His wife, Donna Hargrove, stood near the bookshelf with her arms folded and her expression set. Their daughter, Megan Hargrove, sat in the chair closest to the door. She had not looked at Nathan since he walked in. Richard cleared his throat. He said there was a matter of the Callaway account. He said the partnership had been arranged. He said the families had discussed it, and that the most sensible path forward for everyone involved was a marriage between Nathan Carter and Megan Hargrove to be formalized within the month. Megan didn't flinch. She had already known. That much was visible. Nathan set his coffee cup down on the windowsill and turned from the glass. He said quietly that he understood. He did not say he agreed. He did not say he was pleased. He said he understood, which was true, and he left it there. What Richard Hargrove did not know, what none of them knew, sitting in that study with its mahogany desk and its framed degrees and its air of permanent certainty, was that the man they had summoned to receive their arrangement was not the man they believed they had found. Nathan Carter was not a mid-level acquisitions consultant with a modest practice and a daughter in 3rd grade, and a house on the east side of Millhaven that needed a new roof. He was not someone who needed the Callaway account or the Hargrove name or the arrangement being offered to him across a desk like something that had already been decided. But he sat in the chair. He listened. He said he understood, because Nathan Carter had learned, a long time ago, that the most important information in any room belonged to the person who appeared to need something. His daughter, Lily Carter, was 8 years old and had opinions about everything. She had opinions about the color of her backpack, which was green and had been green for 3 years because she had decided green was the only acceptable color for a backpack. She had opinions about breakfast, which should involve eggs, but not when the edges were brown. She had opinions about the radio station in the truck and about which route they took to school, and about whether the clouds that morning looked like animals or weather systems, which she distinguished with a seriousness that Nathan found quietly extraordinary. She did not yet have opinions about Megan Hargrove. Nathan hadn't told her, not the night of the meeting, when he came home and found her at the kitchen table, working through a page of long division with a pencil she'd chewed down to the metal. Not the weekend after, when they drove out to the lake, and she ran ahead of him on the trail the way she always did, just far enough to feel independent, close enough to hear him if she called back. Not the Tuesday morning a week later when she asked him, without looking up from her cereal, whether he was ever going to get married again. He had paused at that. He asked her what made her think about that. She shrugged. She said Priya at school had a stepmom who braided her hair. She said it in the way children say things that are really about something else entirely. Nathan told her he didn't know. He told her he was focused on her right now. She nodded and went back to her cereal like it was settled, and he stood at the counter holding his coffee and looking at the side of her face, that particular combination of her mother's cheekbones and his own stubbornness, and he thought that there was no version of the arrangement he'd agreed to that was simple, and no version of it that wouldn't eventually arrive at this table. Megan Hargrove was 31 years old and had spent the better part of her 20s building a curatorial practice that had nothing to do with her father's business. She had a small office on Sutter Street. She worked with regional artists. She had a system for everything, her files, her calendar, the way she moved through a gallery opening, the way she spoke to collectors who needed to feel like they had discovered something rather than been sold to. She was precise, and she was controlled, and she was very good at her work. The marriage was not her idea. She had not been asked. She had been informed, over dinner, with the quiet certainty her father reserved for conclusions he had already reached. Her mother had nodded along. There had been talk of the Callaway account, which Megan understood only partially, and talk of consolidation, and the word stability used more than once in ways that had nothing to do with her. She had said very little. She had come home and sat in her kitchen for an hour with the lights off. Then she had made tea and gone to bed, and decided that she would handle this the way she handled everything, by identifying what she could control and doing that precisely. She could not control the marriage. She could apparently control very little about it at all. but she could control how she showed up. She could control whether she was honest. She could control whether the child, Nathan's daughter, whom she had not yet met, felt like a stranger in her own father's house. That mattered to her. She wasn't sure why exactly. It just did. They were married on a Saturday in October in a ceremony that lasted 40 minutes and included 14 guests. Megan's mother wore blue and did not cry, which Megan noticed and filed away without comment. Nathan's sister, Renata Okafor, sat in the third row and watched the whole thing with the expression of someone who was waiting to understand something. Lily Carter sat beside her aunt in a green dress. Green at her insistence, and held Renata's hand without being asked to. Nathan stood at the front of the small chapel and watched Megan walk toward him and thought, with the particular clarity of a person who is very good at reading a room, that she was terrified and wasn't showing it, and that this made him respect her in a way he hadn't expected. She reached him. She looked at him directly, which he appreciated. The officiant spoke. They said the words. Nathan placed a ring on her finger and felt the weight of everything that ring did not yet mean. Afterward, outside, while the small gathering moved toward cars and the photographer was packing up, Lily appeared at Megan's side without announcement and said that she liked her shoes. Megan looked down at her. She said, thank you, that she'd spent a long time choosing them. Lily said she could tell. Then she walked back to Renata. Megan stood on the chapel steps and watched the girl go and thought, unexpectedly, that this might be the most honest thing anyone had said to her all day. The house was Nathan's. He had bought it 6 years ago, after his first marriage ended, and before he understood what he was really building. It was a house on Clearfield Road on the east edge of Millhaven, with 4 bedrooms and a back porch that faced a stand of old maples, and a kitchen that got light in the afternoon the way kitchens should. It needed a new roof. Nathan knew this. He had been aware of the roof for 11 months and had not replaced it. Not because he couldn't, but because there was always something that felt more pressing, which he recognized as its own kind of avoidance. He told Megan the kitchen was fully stocked, that he was usually out by 6:30 on weekdays, and that she was welcome to anything she needed. He said it in the same tone he might use to brief a colleague. Not cold, but careful. Not unfriendly, but not yet anything more than that. She thanked him. She asked where he kept extra blankets. He showed her. He pointed out the thermostat in the upstairs hallway. He said Lily's room was the second on the left and that Lily had a nightlight and sometimes got up around 2 in the morning for water, which was not a problem, just something to know. Megan said she'd remember. Then Nathan went downstairs and stood in the kitchen for a while, looking out at the maples. The light was late afternoon gold, the kind that made everything look more settled than it was. He turned on the radio, low, found something instrumental, and started making dinner. He was not sure what he had agreed to. He was not sure this woman, who was precise and private and had chosen her shoes with tremendous care, knew what she had agreed to either. But they were here. The house was the same as it had been yesterday. Lily would come home from Renata's at 5 o'clock. The maples were doing what maples did in October. He put water on to boil and decided that was enough for right now. The first week was careful. Megan woke early and made her own coffee, and was usually at her office on Sutter Street before Nathan left for wherever Nathan went, which was a question she had not yet asked. She came home in the evenings to find dinner either already made or in progress, and Lily at the table with homework or a book, or some project involving construction paper that had spread across approximately half the surface area. She learned quickly that Lily's projects should not be moved or commented on until Lily had declared them finished. She learned this by moving a piece of construction paper on day 3 and receiving a very thorough explanation of why that had been incorrect. She apologized. Lily considered the apology and accepted it. Then she showed Megan what the project was, which was a map of the solar system with each planet labeled in a different color, and Megan said it was very accurate, which was the right thing to say. After that, Lily began talking to her. Not constantly, not with the immediate attachment of a child who needed something. More like, carefully. Testing, in the patient way of children who have learned that adults sometimes leave. She asked Megan what she did for work. She asked whether the artists Megan worked with were famous. When Megan said some of them were becoming famous, Lily thought about this and said that becoming famous seemed better than already being famous, because if you were already famous, there was nowhere to go. Megan had no argument against this. Nathan, listening from the kitchen, said nothing, but he heard it. 3 weeks in, on a Wednesday night, Megan came home to find the house empty. There was a note on the counter in Lily's handwriting. Large, Dad got a call. We went to the hospital. Back soon. And then, below that, in what was clearly a second thought, there is soup in the fridge, the green pot. Megan stood in the kitchen reading the note for longer than it required. She heated the soup. She sat at the table where Lily usually did her homework. She looked at the solar system map, which had been moved to the wall. Properly finished, apparently, because Lily had taped it up with the careful precision of someone who knew exactly where each thing belonged. She was still sitting there when Nathan and Lily came through the door at 9:15. Lily was half asleep on her feet. Nathan had one hand on his daughter's shoulder, guiding her down the hallway without words, with the ease of a person who had done this 10,000 times. Megan heard him take Lily to her room. She heard the low sounds of a child being settled, shoes coming off, the particular creak of a bed, a voice so quiet it was barely audible. She heard him say something she couldn't make out. She heard Lily say, "Okay, Dad," in that way children say things when they are already mostly asleep. He came back to the kitchen at 9:32. He stopped when he saw her at the table. She said she hoped everything was okay. He said yes. His sister's youngest had been running a fever. It was down now. He said sorry for not calling. She said he didn't need to apologize. She said she'd left soup on the stove if he hadn't eaten. He had not. He got a bowl. He sat down across from her, and for a while they were quiet in the way people are when they are occupying the same space, and have stopped pretending they aren't. He asked how her day had been. She told him. She told him about an artist named Bernard Foles whose show had sold out in 2 hours, and who had called her afterward, not to celebrate but to say he was worried it had sold too fast, like that meant something was wrong with it. Nathan listened without interrupting. At the end, he said he understood what Bernard meant, that success arriving before you were ready for it could feel like a door you'd left unlocked. Megan looked at him. She said that was exactly right. He finished his soup. She refilled her coffee. Outside, the maples had lost most of their leaves, Xef, and the yard had that stripped clear quality that came in November. Everything visible that the summer had been keeping private. She asked him quietly what he actually did. He set his spoon down. He looked at the table for a moment, then back at her. He said that was a fair question. He said he ran a company. He said it was in private equity and asset management, and that it was. He paused, choosing the word with deliberate understatement. Fairly large. He said he had not mentioned it earlier because it had not seemed relevant to what they were navigating, and because in his experience, the information changed how people treated him in ways that weren't useful. Megan was quiet. She said, carefully, that she wished he had told her. He nodded. He said she was right. She said she wasn't angry. She said she was trying to understand who was in her house. He said that was fair, he said. Then what she was seeing, the 6:30 mornings, the soup in the green pot, the girl with her map of the solar system, that was also him. It was not a performance. It was not a cover. He had built the company because he was good at it, and because it allowed him to give Lily a stable life after the kind of instability that had nearly broken both of them. But the company was not what he led with, because it was not the truest thing about him. The truest thing about him was the girl sleeping down the hall. Megan looked at the map on the wall for a moment. Then she looked back at him. She said she understood, and this time, she meant it in the way he had meant it the first night in Richard Hargrove's study. Not agreement, not resolution, but genuine comprehension. She was beginning to see the shape of things. November moved the way November does in that part of the country. Steadily, without drama, the light pulling back a little more each day, until you noticed it all at once and couldn't remember when it started. Megan learned the rhythms of the house. She learned that Lily came home from school wanting silence for approximately 20 minutes before she wanted conversation, and that interrupting this period produced polite but clearly annoyed responses. She learned that Nathan's version of unwinding was standing on the back porch after dinner with his hands in his pockets, watching the yard, for about 10 minutes, alone, after which he was available for whatever the evening required. She learned these things not because either of them explained them, but because she paid attention, and she was good at paying attention. She had not told her parents how wrong they had been about Nathan Carter. She hadn't told them much of anything. Her mother called twice a week. Megan answered with information rather than revelation. She was settling in, the house was comfortable, yes, she was still working. Her father had called once in the second week to ask obliquely about the Calloway account, which Megan didn't have information about and said so, and the conversation ended shortly after. She thought about what Nathan had said about information changing the way people treated him. She found she was beginning to understand that in a way she hadn't before. Her own name opened certain doors. She had always known this. She had also, for most of her adult life, tried to ignore it, to build something that was genuinely hers, to be taken seriously on the merit of the work rather than the name attached to it. It had mostly worked, but it had also required a constant low-level effort, like swimming in a current that never quite stopped. Nathan apparently had been doing the same thing for years, just in the opposite direction, not swimming against a current, choosing to not mention the current at all. The Callaway account collapsed on a Thursday. Megan found out from her father, who called at 11 in the morning in a voice she recognized from childhood. The voice of a man managing visible panic with visible effort. He said the deal had fallen through. He said the Callaway partners had pulled out. He said there were questions about some of the terms of the original arrangement and that the family was going to need to sit down and discuss the implications. Megan listened. She said she'd come that evening. She sat at her desk for a while after she hung up and thought about what this meant for the arrangement that had produced her marriage. She thought about whether Nathan knew. She thought with a particular clarity that surprised her that she did not want this to matter in the way her father would expect it to matter. She called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. She told him what her father had said. She told him she wasn't sure what it meant for whatever he had agreed to with Richard Hargrove, but she thought he should know. There was a pause. He said he appreciated her calling. She said she wanted to ask him something directly. He said, "Go ahead." She said, had he known the Callaway account was going to fall through? Had he known when he agreed to the arrangement? Another pause. Shorter. He said no. He had not known it would collapse. He had suspected the partnership was weaker than Richard believed, but he had not orchestrated its failure. She said she believed him. He said he wanted to be clear about something else too. He said the marriage, whatever it had started as, whatever arrangement her father had constructed around it, was not contingent on the account for him. It never had been. Megan looked out the window at Sutter Street, at the November afternoon, and the people moving along the sidewalk with their coats and their purposes. She said she was beginning to see that. She went to her parents' house that evening. Richard Hargrove looked older than he had 3 months ago. Donna moved around the kitchen with the slightly accelerated energy of a person who has decided to be useful rather than sit with a difficult feeling. There was food that nobody was really eating. Richard started talking about restructuring. He used the word strategy 3 times in 5 minutes. He looked at Megan as if she might provide something, information or connection or the particular resource that the marriage had been intended to secure. Megan set down her fork. She said calmly that she wanted to be clear about something. She said she understood why the arrangement had been made. She understood the business logic. She was not here to condemn the decision, but she needed her father to know that the marriage was not a transaction she was going to manage on his behalf. It was her life. It was Lily's life. And whatever her father was hoping she might leverage or communicate or arrange, that wasn't going to happen. Richard looked at her. Donna looked at the table. Megan said she loved them. She said she needed this to be clear so that the 3 of them could continue to have a relationship that was honest. Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in a voice she didn't often hear from him, that he understood. She nodded. She stayed another hour. She drove home through the city in the dark, the kind of November dark that felt like the year finishing something it had started. And she felt lighter in a way she couldn't have predicted. She got back to the house on Clearfield Road at 9:40. The kitchen light was on. Nathan was at the table with a cup of coffee and a folder that he closed when she came in. Lily was asleep. She hung up her coat. She sat down across from him. He asked how it went. She told him. Not all of it. Not the part that felt too private yet, but the shape of it, what she had said. What her father had said, that she thought it had been the right thing. Nathan listened. He didn't say good for you or I'm proud of you or any of the things that would have been easy and slightly wrong. He just listened, and when she was done, he said that sounded like a hard conversation that she'd handled well. She said it had been. She looked at the folder he'd closed. She asked if she could ask him something. He said yes. She asked what the company was actually worth. He looked at her steadily. He said he could show her the annual report if she wanted it. She said she didn't, not specifically. She said she was asking because she wanted to understand the scale of what he was. What they were now, if she was being accurate about her situation. And she didn't want to be the last to know things about her own life anymore. He considered this with the particular care he gave to things that mattered. Then he said, it was the largest private equity firm in the Pacific Northwest. It had offices in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver. It managed assets in excess of $4 billion. He said it quietly, without emphasis, the way he said most things. Not ashamed, not performing modesty, just accurately. Megan absorbed this. She said after a moment that she supposed the roof really did need replacing. Then Nathan looked at her. Then, for the first time since she had known him, since the study, since the chapel, since the soup in the green pot, he laughed. Not politely, actually laughed, which changed his whole face, which made him look like a different person and also somehow more like himself. She smiled. She couldn't help it. He said yes. The roof had needed replacing for 11 months and he had been avoiding it, and there was no good reason for that. She said she'd noticed. He said of course she had. They sat in the kitchen for another hour. They talked about the roof, and then about something she'd read, and then about Lily, who had apparently announced at school that she intended to name a planet someday, and her teacher had told her that was a wonderful goal, and Lily had said she wasn't asking for permission. Nathan told this story with the slightly exhausted, completely undisguised pride of a parent who is also a little bit afraid of their child, and Megan laughed, and the kitchen was warm, and the maples outside were bare and still. At some point, the conversation became something else, not the careful exchange of two people managing an arrangement, but something more like the natural rhythm of two people who were, perhaps, beginning to understand each other. She did not mark the moment when it shifted. She only noticed later that it had. In December, the roof was replaced. Nathan hired the crew. Megan chose the material, a detail he had not expected to delegate, and found, when she presented the research she'd done, that he had no objection to. She had strong opinions about the material. They turned out to be correct. Lily went through the phase of watching the crew work from the kitchen window with the focused attention of someone gathering data, and then asked Nathan that evening whether construction was something you could make art about. He said he supposed you could make art about anything. She said she was going to think about it. He said that sounded good. Megan started working from the house on Fridays, not because the commute was long, but because Fridays were lighter, and the afternoon light in the kitchen was good, and she had learned that she thought better in natural light. Nathan didn't comment on this development. He simply, one Friday afternoon, set a cup of coffee on the corner of the table where she was working without interrupting her, and went back to wherever he had been. She picked up the coffee without looking up. He had gotten it exactly right. The evening before Christmas Eve, Renata Okafor came to dinner with her husband, Marcus, and their 2 children, and the house was loud in a way that it wasn't usually, and Megan found that she didn't mind it. Renata was direct and funny and watched her brother with the knowing attention of a sibling who understood him in ways a spouse takes years to learn. At one point during dinner, when Nathan was in the kitchen, Renata leaned over to Megan and said, without preamble, that her brother was the most private person she had ever known, and that it took him a long time to trust people, and that she noticed he had started trusting her. Megan said she wasn't sure she'd earned it yet. Renata said that was exactly the kind of thing that meant she had. Later, after the children had been put to various beds and Marcus and Nathan were on the back porch, with a particular air of men who have run out of things to say and are comfortable with that, Renata sat across from Megan at the kitchen table and asked what she knew about Nathan's first marriage. Megan said she didn't know much. Renata said she'd ask him, that it was his to tell. But she said he had not been the same after it. Not worse exactly, more careful, more certain about certain things. Lily, the work, the people he let in, and less certain about the rest. She said she had spent 4 years watching him hold the house together and the business together and not fall apart, and she had thought, more than once, that the holding together was costing him something. She said she hoped it was costing him less now. Megan looked at the table. She said she hoped that too. On Christmas morning, Lily came downstairs at 6:45, which Nathan had apparently been warned about, and Megan had not, and the morning was exactly what that kind of morning is. Wrapping paper and strong coffee and someone small moving through the room at a pace that required everyone else to either keep up or get out of the way. At some point in the middle of it, Lily opened a box that contained a set of professional-grade colored pencils, 64 colors individually labeled, and went very quiet. She looked up at Megan. She said, "You got these?" Megan said she had. She said she'd noticed the ones Lily had been using were getting short. Lily looked at the pencils for another moment. Then she got up, crossed the room, and hugged Megan around the middle in the direct, uncomplicated way of a child who has decided something. Nathan, from the couch, said nothing. Megan put her hand on the back of Lily's head and looked out the window at the December yard, and thought that this was not what she had expected when she sat in her father's study in September and received information about her life, like it was a directive from above. It was different. It was harder, in some ways. In other ways, it was not hard at all. In January, Richard Hargrove called Nathan directly for the first time. He did not call about the Callaway account, which was finished. He called to ask, in the halting way of a man who is unaccustomed to asking rather than announcing, whether Nathan might be willing to have coffee sometime. Nathan said yes. He did not tell Megan right away. He told her that evening, after Lily was in bed, in the kitchen, which had by now become the place where they told each other things. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said her father was not good at apology but sometimes tried to approximate it through effort, and that if Nathan was willing, it might be worth finding out what the effort looked like. Nathan said he was willing. She said that was generous of him. He said he wasn't sure it was generosity, exactly. He said he just found, in general, that the people who had done the wrong thing and were trying to move towards something better deserved at least the chance to try. Megan looked at him. She said she thought that was probably the truest thing she'd heard him say. He picked up his coffee. He said she hadn't heard much yet. She said she was listening. The house was quiet. The way houses are in January when the year is new and the roads outside are empty and there is no particular reason to be anywhere other than where you are. The roof had been fixed. The maples in the yard were bare and would be for months, and then they wouldn't be. Lily had her pencils and her planets and her opinions about everything. Nathan Carter sat across the table from the woman who had come into his house in October not knowing what she was agreeing to, and thought, with the same quality of attention he gave to everything that mattered, that something was being built here that he had not built before. He didn't name it. He wasn't ready for that. But he didn't look away from it either.